Welcome to Noble Fury Podcast. Today we're going to talk about the famous 1971 skyjacking that involved the mysterious D.B. Cooper.
Right.
Scott, can you give us a little background, facts and background on what's going on?
Listen, it's one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries in U.S. history. I mean, he's a legendary figure. He's in pop culture. There's festivals around the country celebrating, quote unquote, celebrating, which we could get to in a minute. Might be the wrong term. I guess even Don Draper on Mad Men was fashioned after this D.B. Cooper, the clothes and the attitude, the wrapper, the shades. And so D.B. Cooper has worked himself into Americana. He's part of the fabric of our country of the festivals. It's odd because he terrorized the crew and some of the passengers. An interesting footnote too about that is that a lot of the passengers didn't even know there was a hijacking going on. To his credit, he was that calm. He wasn't interested in creating a big scene. But anyway, back to the other thing quickly that a lot of people have talked about, and we'll just touch on, so acknowledging the fact that, of course, the moniker D.B. Cooper was apparently attributed to a mix-up in the media. He bought the ticket under the name Dan Cooper from Portland to Seattle on Northwest Orient, Flight 305.
A very short flight.
On November 24th, 1971.
Day before Thanksgiving.
Which is interesting. FBI agents travel, everybody's scattered around the country to celebrate Thanksgiving. He picked kind of a low slung, the eve of the biggest family holiday in of the calendar, and maybe was trying to leverage that, right, for causing a slower delay and a search. Think if you're trying to mobilize police and right on the eve of Thanksgiving, and everyone's like, "What? I got to get off the couch. I'm watching football," right? Even in 1971 when there was only 3 networks. Different podcast. So here we have D.B. Cooper, who, he, again, bought the ticket for $20 under the name Dan Cooper. Somewhere in the media early in this story, the moniker D.B. Cooper was attributed to this figure, this person, and we're stuck with this cool, intriguing name of D.B. Cooper. So that brings us to, what do we know about the course of events that went down on the day of the hijacking? What?
Yeah, so let's talk about what the FBI found on the plane. Let's get some basic facts about what was discovered. Yeah, this is the basic evidence. They found 66 fingerprints. They have a tie and a tie clip, which is made of the mother of pearl. And this tie is a clip-on tie. It is not the standard kind of tie that you make the knot yourself. This kind you give to a little kid, but was much more common in earlier generations. But you just clip it on.
J.C. Penney apparently was.
There's a J.C. Penney tie, and it was my note here.
Interesting, by the way. J.C. Penney's still around, Jeff. We don't have to pick the name of a brick and mortar organization
that's gone out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. J.C. Penney.
I think
holding strong.
If my notes are correct here, that tie was manufactured between 1964 and 1966. So it was a certain lot of tie that could have only been bought during that period, 64 to 66. They found 2 parachutes, unused parachutes. He requested 4.
Which we'll talk about in a minute. The parachutes. Very important, that number 4.
Yeah. And 8 cigarette butts. And they found hair from his headrest. So in lots of different, settings, you'll hear that his seat was 18C, I think, is often reported. But in fact, it turns out that his seat was 18E, which is on the other side of the aisle. Different position.
So you're saying
they found hair.
The FBI didn't look for hair in 18C, I hope.
No. They recovered the hair from the correct location, apparently. And so the FBI also, on the money that he requested, the $200,000 in $20 bills, those serial numbers were transmitted to all the major casinos, all the major banks. So everyone that would have been in a position to deal with large sums of money had access to these serial numbers.
Was looking for it, in other words. Tipped off.
They could have been looking for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
In case he tried to use some of it, obviously.
Right. So what can you tell us, though, about while he was on the plane? What were his interactions like?
Well, there was a lot of comments. One, that he was sort of very, very calm and unassuming, polite and friendly. Which is sort of an odd characterization. You think of hijackers, stressed out and yelling orders and,
sweating bullets.
You're sweating bullets. And he was apparently calm and polite. The 2 flight attendants, Tina Mucklow, who's originally from Buck County in Pennsylvania, and Florence Schaefer, who is from Arkansas. Schaffner, I'm sorry, thank you, who was 22 and 23 respectively, relatively young, which may have fed into perhaps maybe being slightly less sort of aviationally savvy, right, to what their surroundings and what's going on. Not that they did anything poor, but if you had perhaps had a stewardess, obviously most stewardesses went through their career with no hijackings, but you still would have sort of a familiarity and comfort with the plane and the attributes of the plane, the aisles, the cockpit, the intercom system that younger stewardesses may not have. So
D.B. Cooper, hands off a note to Flo Schaffner, and she doesn't read it right away, and so he gets her attention again and says, "Hey, you should read this note."
Do you remember what the wording of the opening of the note was? "I have a bomb."
I have a bomb.
Right.
And so then she then goes into her purse. She thinks that this guy's just hitting on her and gives her a little note. He's like, "You should look at the note." She looks at the note, and then she comes and sits near him. Now, recall that there are only 36 passengers, including D.B. Cooper, on the plane at the
42
time.
Total with crew.
The plane can hold something like 130 passengers, and so there's plenty of space. She sits down near him. And
he's in the very, very last row of the plane, right? Or near the last row?
I don't know where 18E would have been. I don't know.
That doesn't sound right.
So she sits down near him, and they begin talking, and he opens his briefcase, his attaché case, and he shows a very intricately designed bomb, with what appears to be dynamite and wires and some control unit in it. So she then gets information from him and relays that information to the pilots. The pilots communicate with ground control, and they get the whole operation in order. His request is once they get to Seattle, they need to refuel, and they're going to have a new flight path from Seattle to Mexico.
And he has requested?
He's requested 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills. Flo Schaffner does not think she actually requested the $20 bill increments. So she was when she got the money back to give to him, she was really surprised that there were $20 bills, because she was supposed to ask for $20 bills, but she didn't actually communicate that to the pilots to ask for the $20 bills. But they provided the $20 bills. The FBI provided the $20 bills. And I think they came from Seattle First National Bank. And they were recorded. All the information was recorded off of them, and I think photographs taken of all the
obviously including the I would say serial number.
The serial numbers were all recorded. This money was apparently already prepared in case of extortions and things. Anyway, these banks were always keeping lots of money already pre-recorded and
doesn't say much about the state of the country in 1971. You're anticipating, that you're going to need some money standing by to be extorted.
Yeah. So D.B. Cooper boarded the plane. He was dressed in a black overcoat, trench coat. He had a black suit on, brown shoes, black tie, white shirt.
Penny loafers, by the way, which had no traction, no sole.
Some sort of a loafer.
Yeah.
Although I think that was what was first reported. But then I think that's been updated since, and he was wearing a type of low zip-up boot, like a very low boot with a little zipper on the side.
So makes a lot more sense.
It does. So the money was provided to him when they were in Seattle, along with the parachutes. Now we're going to talk about these parachutes a little bit. Do you have any kind of?
Well, I think it's really interesting, and this has been talked a lot about, but the 4 parachutes is really smart, right? You ask for a parachute and a backup chute, and the FBI just gives you a chute that's going to default and not work, and you've solved the case. You just go find the body. So he
stuck to a tree.
Yeah. He wisely asked for 4 chutes, which of course is a way of intimating that you're going to take somebody with you, right? And so that absolves any opportunity for the FBI to have that easy shot at him by just picking a chute that doesn't, giving him a faulty chute. So the 4 chutes is really smart. 2 in the front and 2 in the back. Now you have to front chutes, which are backup chutes, and 2 in the for the back. The interesting thing to know is you uncovered the fact that the person that folded these parachutes, a local Seattle parachute expert.
Yeah. His name was Lynn Emmerich. He was the man who prepared the reserve chutes. These are the chest chutes that would ordinarily.
By prepared, you mean folds them, prepare, gets them ready to be used.
Yeah,
right?
correct. So whenever a chute is prepared, there's a log book and it's signed off, and there's a certification, so to say who prepared this chute for use. So he has a couple of reserve chutes, these chest chutes. The FBI wants them, but he's like, I'm never going to get these things back. So he's giving them his junkiest equipment that he's got because he doesn't want to lose his good equipment. So one of the chutes turns out to be a kind of a dummy chute, or a chute that's inoperable. It's sewn shut. I think that's the major issue with it. Hands that to the FBI along with one reserve chute that's actually in good condition, working condition. Another man by the name of Norman Hayden, who had a firm called Renton, I think, Aviation. He had an airplane that he would use for stunt use. And it had 4 seats, and at the time you had to have enough chutes for each seat on the plane. So he had 4 chutes, and they were able to easily and quickly access those chutes. But 2 of them were prepared by a man named Earl Cossey. So Earl Cossey prepared 2 of Norman Hayden's chutes, of the 4 chutes that he kept on his plane. Norman Hayden provided 2 of those chutes to the FBI for use for satisfying D.B. Cooper's request. So these 2 chutes are both Earl Cossey at the time. This is contemporaneous news reporting and FBI documents recorded in their investigation. Earl Cossey described them as NB6, which are Navy parachutes, NB6 style.
Important
chutes.
distinction, because chutes comes up later about the.
We will talk about that in a little while. Yeah, yep. And importantly, that there are no D-rings or fasteners attached to these main chutes. These D-rings are used to attach the reserve chute, the chest chute, to them, right? But these chutes are emergency military bailout chutes. These NB6 chutes. These are not meant for recreational skydiving or the traditional types of skydiving uses. They're meant for the plane is on fire. I'm going to jump out now, and you just got this one chute. Okay,
but it's interesting because what you're saying is he doesn't have the rings in the front to attach the front backup chute, right?
No attachments. There are also lacking are any kind of quick release mechanisms and various things. These chutes are all cinch up style strapping. Okay, no D-rings, no connectors. So he prepares this. Earl Cossey prepares, and Earl Cossey is sort of becomes somewhat famous in the D.B. Cooper world.
Folklore
for having prepared these chutes, but it actually comes from Norman Hayden. He did prepare the chutes for Norman Hayden. Norman Hayden is the one, though, who gave the chutes. They were Norman Hayden chutes, and he's the one who gave them to the FBI. So very important stuff. That's really kind of often confused.
The provenance is important of the chutes, right? Who folded them, where they came from.
So the other thing that we need to talk about is why does D.B. Cooper, why is he interested in $200,000? And for that matter, why $20 bills?
Well, sorry. I was going
to say, so $200,000 is a very specific number.
Sure. And you and I have talked about this before we started rolling on this. And there's some of this, what we're talking about now, about the $200,000 and what the logistics of wrangling that, right? A couple of things. One, the FBI intentionally gave D.B. Cooper a poorly designed bag with which to carry this. The satchel that's containing the $200,000 is not really. It doesn't buckle closed. It doesn't have straps on. It doesn't have handles. It's in essence what I read was in essence a poorly designed laundry bag. It had a
looks like a laundry bag.
Yeah, it had a drawstring at the top, and so you've got it's not very
or
durable.
A money bag.
Yeah, even worse, right? Which is really just made to. And so he had that's one of the challenges. The other things to know about sort of the attributes of this $200,000 is, there was some talk about why didn't he ask for more money. The $200,000 we discussed, and I think other people obviously have come to the same conclusion, is it weighs a certain amount of money. Yeah. I mean, a certain amount of weight.
Yeah.
And you have to know that he's got to carry this and hold it in his arms or strap it to his body. And so you can't have 50 pounds of money. You could try, but if you drop some money, you're going to cause problems for yourself. So he picked an amount, and $200,000 in $20 bills ends up weighing about 21, 22 pounds.
Yeah, it's a little over 20 pounds, right?
Okay, so that's logistically easier to wrangle. And then he's got the denominations of $20. And why would you pick the denominations of $20? Well, at the time, it sounds crazy now because $20 doesn't buy anything. Different podcast. But in 1971, things, household items were $1 or $2, and $20 was enough to go to the grocery store with.
You can't buy a couple gallons of milk and a few cartons of eggs at $20 today.
No,
right?
no, eggs is coming down, but still can't.
No.
So the idea, of course, if you asked for 50s or hundreds and had 22 pounds of $50 bills or $100 bills, you would of course have a lot more money. But once you were trying to bleed yourself back into society,
you couldn't use it.
You could, if you pulled out a $100 bill in a grocery store in 1971, two managers came over to look at it.
Yeah, $1.71 is worth about $4 today.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. By the way, that's 1.2 million today, and in today's dollars, or give or take. You said a little bit, maybe perhaps less. So the point of it all is he picked that amount and he picked those denominations for those reasons. We're actually really smart, right? And picking the 4 chutes, really intelligent, making the FBI think he's going to take somebody with him. Hands off, can't give him faulty chutes. So those parts of his planning, D.B. Cooper's planning, are actually really well thought out.
Yeah. And in fact, it seems like a very analytical person who might do something like this, honestly. He was very meticulous in his preparation and what he was doing and the manner. He kept a very calm manner. And he seemed like a person who was very confident in what he was doing. One of the things is choosing the right amount of money so he's not overburdened on a parachute ride down from 10,000 feet.
And let's talk about the 10,000 feet for a fast second, and about the 727, which was one of the few aircraft at the time that you could lower the
there was a rear stairs came out of the tail.
There was no safety device on it. You could lower it at 20,000 feet in the air. So he, of course, ordered it down to 10,000 feet, which, by the way, was the lowest, the highest elevation where there was no oxygen needed, which wouldn't cause the oxygen mask to come down, which would have caused panic in the cabin.
Well, not for the oxygen masks. Then I think
the pressurization of the cabin is what I mean.
It was the pressurization of the cabin.
That's what I mean.
That's the issue.
If you open that at a higher level.
I think he let all the passengers go in Seattle after they gave him the $200,000 and they gave him the parachutes.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I got that out of
all of the passengers were off the plane. So by this time, there wouldn't have been any other passengers. Just a few. I think 2 crew member or 2 stewardesses that they call the time, flight attendants, and then the cockpit crew. So he wants the plane to be at 10,000 feet so that he doesn't run out of oxygen when he jumps out of the plane. Right. He also asks the plane to be the speed to be reduced to a slower level. So if you imagine traveling at 400 miles an hour versus traveling at 200 miles an hour or 250 miles an hour, there's going to be a big difference on when you jump out of that plane, what the wind is going to do to you and your descent down.
And by the way, whether or not he did this deliberately, that there was 2 fighter Navy Air Force jets that were shadowing the plane and were scurried into the air, and that airspeed was so slow that it caused a huge problem for the pilots
to actually follow.
Yeah, because they couldn't fly that slow. So they had to circle and they had to fly an S pattern. And they were flying at 11,000 feet, and this flight was at 10,000 feet, and they were up in the clouds, and so they couldn't see the plane, and they couldn't see each other.
This was nighttime,
Sure.
And there was a light rain as well.
You didn't want to cause any, right? You don't want D.B. Cooper looking out the window and seeing, or lowering the stairs and seeing some fighter jets. So
let's get into now some of the, for instance, what are some of the basic theories? Right, so I think we could just say, okay, there are two basic ways that this could unfold, right?
Can I set up one other thing? So sorry, Jeff.
Sure.
Real quickly. Speaking of the date, that we should talk quickly about that November 24th, 1971 date. which was the eve of Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And I think he leveraged that date, picked that date intentionally, because FBI agents and police and most airport staff would have spread around the country to visit for the most populous calendar date of visiting family,
Sure.
Thanksgiving. So he does it on the eve of where everyone's already in their destination, sitting on the couch watching football, and he launches this hijacking.
Yeah.
So I think that was really another pretty smart. You're right.
Part of the plan.
Part of his idea with which to increase his chances of not having as much to wrangle on the day of the event.
Yeah.
The hijack.
So if we think of two different basic paths that could happen. So D.B. Cooper, Dan Cooper, dies in the jump. He jumps, doesn't make it down. He dies in the air, or he gets down, hits a tree, chute doesn't
temperature,
work.
disorientation, nighttime, not
Whatever.
right clothes, right?
Rain,
all those things.
cold.
Right.
He doesn't deploy his chute properly in time because his hands are freezing cold. Whatever. He dies. The other route we could take is that he survived. And then if he survived, what happens?
Where is he?
So if we take that path of dying, why it doesn't work out, I think, is one, no body has ever been found in all these years.
Not to mention clothes and the
and
money.
Parachute.
And
This is a
yeah.
nylon. These are nylon parachutes. They would have been visible from the air if they got tangled in trees. They would have been pretty obvious if you were hikers or if you were hunters on the ground going through the forest, or if you were part of the rescue search and rescue team.
Right, I was going to mention, Jeff, as we talked about earlier before we started rolling, it was one of the most extensive manhunts in U.S. history. Almost 1,000 police, FBI agents, search party, 1,000 people scouring the landscape looking. Boy, you sure would have found a random, a shoe, a airline napkin. Something is going to pop up when you're combing the earth to that degree, right?
Sure.
Found nothing.
Nothing. There was nothing. The money has not been found. There was no baggage found. No clothing. No parachutes. Opened or not.
The $5,800, which we'll talk about in a second, that was found later.
That was found later, but it was buried in the earth. It could have been naturally buried. It could have been left there. And
the whole theory about the
buried.
river, did it get washed up in the river?
But no body. There was no body found. So I think, for me, I think we could, although it's possible that he died and he got swept away in a river, the money would have probably sunk in the water and not floated. This is not something that probably floats. It probably sinks. The way he was dressed, the weight on his body, he would have probably sunk, and with the parachute half opened, it would have been brought down in the water. The parachute would have maybe stayed atop of the water, but he would have gone beneath. So there was nothing found, and surely it would have been tangled up in the winding river, the rocks, the trees, and so forth. Nothing discovered. So for me, I think it's much less likely that he died in the jump.
Just only if only because they found nothing.
They've not found nothing.
Yeah, it's the $1,500 later, but that's a different.
Which then takes us to the path of, well, he survived. And so what happened? Days after, we started getting letters that were sent to local newspapers in the area.
This is a great thing you got here, Jeff.
These were cut out. The letters were all cutouts from other newspapers, and
so that there's no handwriting.
There's no handwriting, and they have simple messages. Thanks for the hospitality. Appreciate
cheeky messages.
Cheeky.
Yeah.
Appreciate the effort or whatever. And they were all signed D.B. Cooper. So he's got this letter.
These letters that are written by D.B. Cooper, addressed, signed by D.B. Cooper, in essence.
Yeah, but then there's this letter that gets to the FBI, which is a much more thorough letter. And it describes, this is about a month later, and it describes, a person who has 14 months to live. Jeff,
do we want to make the distinction about the signed D.B. Cooper and signed Dan Cooper? That whole.
Well, that's what we were just saying. Yeah.
Okay.
And so with these various different letters, they're signed D.B. Cooper, but in fact, he buys his ticket with the name Dan Cooper, and he's going as Dan Cooper. The media erroneously comes up with D.B. Cooper.
He's never called himself D.B. Cooper.
He's never called himself D.B. Cooper. So the FBI is able to discount a great number of these phony hoax letters, hoax notices sent to newspapers because of the D.B. Cooper.
Anybody who signs the letter, I'm the hijacker, signed, thanks for the money, signed D.B. Cooper, is very, very likely phony because the hijacker never called himself D.B. Cooper.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So
this letter, though, that was sent to the FBI was never originally released to the public. It came out in these documents that the FBI began to provide the public, I think, in 2016. So the letter was finally released to the public with a trove of FBI investigation documents. I think it was 2016 when they began, or 2017 when they began to release this information to the public. And since then, people have had access to a great number of various different pieces of evidence and the investigation findings.
So what you're saying is some of the contents of the letter could have been attributable to the fact that some of those details have been released. Is that what you mean?
No, I'm saying that this FBI letter, that the one where the guy says I've got 14 months to live, that was never known to the public early on.
I see.
The FBI kept that one though for itself. The other ones that were known were the ones sent to newspapers, where he signs D.B. Cooper.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what comes of this letter that the guy says he's?
Well, it's an interesting letter because it kind of reads like a person who is a little bit more serious about the
events of that day.
Yeah, they knew some things and they kind of were familiar with it. I think ultimately that it was still discounted as not as being a hoax.
You wonder if somebody had 14 months to live. All right. So some of the other things that we want to get into. Some of the other attributes of
well, let's talk about some of the people.
Sure.
Right. So I know you know a great deal about Richard McCoy
McCoy
and the breaking news. Right.
Yes,
We recently in 2025 got breaking news.
Yeah.
About the case is solved.
Yes.
We could just stop the podcast now because it was solved.
And then in January of 25, a retired pilot named Dan Gryder, who released a D.B. Cooper documentary on YouTube. And
he has a channel, by the way.
Yeah,
he's a retired pilot, and he has a channel, and he's done a lot of
exhaustive research,
a lot of shows about D.B. Cooper.
Now he came out and he was on CNN on an interview, which we can stick a segment in, proclaiming that he found the parachute and has solved, in essence, the case. That he's in the attic of I
think it was a basement of Richard McCoy, who was one of the primary suspects.
Right, and one of the earlier, bigger names, so to speak, higher profile suspects. And Dan Gryder has this footage of him unveiling this parachute, which he announces is the parachute that D.B. Cooper.
But tonight, my next guest says that he has found that parachute that D.B. Cooper used, and that it could actually end the mystery once and for all.
We just solved it. Literally. Literally. This is the rig because they know what rig he used when he jumped that night.
It was kind of like Geraldo Rivera, breaking into the
vault.
The vault, to see Hoffa's tomb or something.
Yeah.
And in fact, though, right?
Yeah.
What does he have?
Yeah. Well, he has a parachute that's not from the right branch of the military. He's got a wrong model of the parachute, and this isn't that. But to me, I felt unsettling. He's just holding it. He's not wearing gloves. He's handling it like something that, obviously if you've got a piece of evidence that's of that potential significance, you are handling it in a fashion. Look, we all watch TV. We would just know that, you don't touch the darn thing. There's DNA on it, theoretically. And in today's science, you could extract, today's techniques. So it could have been, but instead he's, holding it up to the camera and just
I think the biggest problem with that parachute is he's got the D-rings on this parachute.
Right.
Now, he talks about the fact that it was modified, and he shows some spots where the ripcord was transferred from one side to the other, okay, possibly a lefty to a righty. but it has D-rings built in it, and it is built with these quick release mechanisms for the strapping, and those just were not part of. By the way, remember, it's part of the facts that we talked about when we first started this. The FBI found one of the unused chutes, the primary back chute. One of those was left on board the plane.
Right.
So, that chute was identical to the chute that D.B. Cooper wore as he jumped, but it does not contain D-rings or quick releases, and moreover, the people who pack these chutes specifically say the chutes did not have D-rings or quick releases.
In addition to that, the flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, looked through the peephole from the cockpit to the back of the plane and watched D.B. Cooper struggle to tie the money to the front of his body because there was nothing to fasten the bag to.
Precisely.
If he had D-rings,
he would have just attached to the D-rings.
It would have been problem solved. Of course, and remember how disorienting jumping out. D-rings would be really functionally useful for you're jumping out of that airplane in the middle of the night, free fall, you're spinning and disorienting, and so you really need things, the equipment strapped down.
So Richard McCoy though was a primary suspect. The FBI had him on for a long time. Now he was one of the people who was part of participating in one of the 14 follow-up skyjackings that took place after
copycat in essence.
Copycats,
right?
And so he, shortly after this, several months after the November 24th incident, he tries his own. He tells beforehand, though, he's a Mormon, and he tells a colleague that,
right?
Look, I could do this. Mm-hmm. I could do this. I could do it better. He asks for $500,000.
Well, one of the things he said when he bragged about it was that he said D.B. Cooper was a fool. He should have asked for
more money. But maybe D.B. Cooper understood what he was doing. This guy attempts it, asks for $500,000. He actually was successful in getting the jump. He executed it 727.
There's no aviation security. It's not that hard to hijack a plane.
727, just like the 727, the Northwest 727-51, I think it was, has this rear stair that comes out of the back, got to 10,000 feet. Same playbook that D.B. Cooper used. He jumped and he got $500,000. The FBI gets a tip from his buddy that he says, "Oh, I could do this. Watch, I could do this even better." And he goes and does it. His friend tells the police. The police notify FBI. FBI raids his house. They find the $500,000. I think just a few $100s was missing from the bundle of money. He was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 40 years in prison. He tries to escape prison by making some kind of a phony gun, escapes with several people, and is killed in the days following his escape from prison in a battle with the FBI or police.
There's a really, really huge problem with McCoy as D.B. Cooper, and it's insurmountable. You can't get past it. And it is that both flight attendants who spent the better part of an hour more than an hour, directly sitting next to and interacting personally face-to-face with D.B. Cooper, Dan Cooper, both wholly dismissed this McCoy as D.B. Cooper.
He wasn't the real McCoy.
He didn't look anything like they both said flat out, not even close, not a chance. And so that alone, right, eyewitness testimony, and they were very confident, and they weren't dismissive of it. It was immediate. Their reaction was immediate.
This guy had a lot.
That's not the guy. That was the reaction.
He had a lot of skills, right? He was a paratrooper in the military. He had military training. He was a bad guy. Apparently he was a kind of involved with other felonies besides this.
Those attributes are great, but you can't get past.
But he was a Mormon.
Yeah.
Interestingly, and guess what?
Didn't smoke.
Mormons don't smoke or drink.
And this guy enjoyed his bourbon.
He enjoyed his bourbon
and cigarettes.
Eight cigarettes and a bourbon. And so
you can't fake smoke at 8 cigarettes.
I don't think it's him. No. I don't think it's him.
And does all that.
Now,
so
again, his family comes out and says, Richard McCoy was killed. The wife eventually died. And the kids are now saying that, we think our dad was D.B. Cooper. I don't think so.
And Dan Gryder thinks it was him because he thinks he has the parachute.
He thinks he has the parachute, but it was the wrong parachute.
Yeah, many reasons, many problems.
So there are other people on this list. Quickly, there's a fella named Kenny Christiansen who was a purser for Northwest Orient airline.
Jeff, we got to talk about the tie real fast too. We can't forget about the tie.
We won't forget the tie.
Okay.
So Kenny Christiansen was a purser. He was a male a flight attendant. We call people flight attendants today. Back then they were all stewardesses, but he was a purser. I think that was just the name they gave to more senior flight attendants. So he made $250 a month. Had complained about not having money and lack of money.
Underpaid.
He was underpaid, not treated well by Northwest Orient. And he would have known the ins and outs of this plane. Would have understood that they had this rear staircase and so forth. In the months after the skyjacking, he has a bank account with $186,000 in it, a man making $250 a month. He's giving $5,000 gifts to family members.
So not only does he have a bunch of unexplainable money, but he's giving it away. Which is
really weird. And there's a passing resemblance to DB Cooper, but that's all, just a passing resemblance. So we have Kenny Christiansen, who is this guy who's got
former paratrooper.
He's got paratrooper training. He's got this boatload of money now sitting in his bank account, making little.
There's something important
monthly
too.
Basis.
He's got a resemblance to the.
He's got
drone.
a resemblance. There's a resemblance,
to
right?
The FBI sketch.
But the reason I don't think he's the right guy is simple. He continues working. He worked for Northwest Orient. This is not the biggest airline in the world. He's in the corridor that he normally flies in, so people might know him. He'd run across some people, possibly.
Yeah. You disappear when you.
And then afterwards, he continues to work for Northwest Airline for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So I don't see how
that's audacious.
I don't see how he could get away from a pilot not noticing him, from one of the flight attendants not noticing him, somebody not noticing that he was the one who jumped off the airplane with $200,000.
You're hiding in plain sight. Is that
hiding in plain sight? So I don't think it was him. But there's another guy who's come into a lot of prominence recently, and his name is Lieutenant Robert Rickshaw. What do you know of Rackstraw? What do you know of Rackstraw?
Rackstraw, unfortunately, isn't a very good suspect for a lot of reasons. I think, first of all, he died in 2019. He denied before his death that it was him. They tried to pin it on him, and he wasn't interested in taking credit for it. Theoretically, he could have done the deathbed confessional, and that might have been. Many people would do that, but some people might not admit to it and let it go to their grave. But the fact is Rackstraw was elevated as a suspect by a group of retired investigators, never by the FBI. The FBI never considered him a viable suspect. It was only through outside third-party people that had a vested interest, people would argue, propagating that this Rackstraw was legit.
So Rackstraw, the biggest problem. There are a number of problems, but the biggest one he's got to overcome is he was just too young.
Yeah, so that's another huge problem.
The witness ID. We've got 35 passengers. Who've seen this guy.
But the two flight attendants are
two flight attendants who spend a lot of time with him.
Right.
The pilots saw the guy. So the age range is pegged from 30 to 55 years old.
Late 40s, whatever, right?
Well, it's just 30 to 55, and they're thinking something in late 40s, right?
Right.
This guy is 28 and looks all of 26.
Yeah.
He just looks like a young man, and he's a young man at the time.
You can't back past
It's a tough thing to come across. Now, he does have a long military service, 8 years in the military. He flew helicopters. He went through paratroop school, so he knew about jumping out of helicopters and jumping out of airplanes. So he was familiar with the whole aviation ecosystem and using parachutes. So that was a good thing. And the FBI also found several points of ID on his face. So if you do a match location, he's got some match locations to the sketch, the various different sketches. Now, these sketches have been updated, though, over time.
And remember, you're matching something to a sketch, not to a photograph. So the sketch could be flawed.
The sketch could be flawed. Exactly.
Right. So
that's a problem. Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. So I was going to say that we each have what we're calling our secret
suspects.
You have a secret suspect, which I think is different than mine. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have a secret suspect, And so we're going to talk about these guys next. What I'm going to do, though, is bring up some information about the tie, the necktie.
The tie, the clip-on tie is a key piece of evidence.
Yeah. And so this tie is a clip-on tie. And one of the things that I think you're keen on with the clip-on tie is, look, if you're jumping out of an airplane, you don't want to have to fool around with this noose around your neck, right?
Right.
And so it's easily removable.
But you're also stepping onto the plane, you're conveying a businessman, right? There's nothing unbecoming about this person. He's dressed nicely. He's wearing a tie.
Yeah. Now,
right?
one thing that I do have to say, though, about the tie is that, this is this JCPenney's tie, which was made, as we mentioned, between 64 and 66.
Mm-hmm.
So it's of a style, though. Everybody talks about how stylish this guy is. He does kind of cut that sort of stylish 60s look. The problem is he's 10 years out of style because this is 1971.
Sure.
Now think about that for a minute.
You're talking about the skinny suit.
The skinny suit, the skinny necktie. This is a person who bought their suits 10 years before. Now,
sure.
Anybody who's been out there in the work world in the suit period of time knows you suit up for a while, and then now you keep your suits for 10 years before you get new suits or longer. So this is a person who bought their clothes. So they're going to be a little older. You just know that by the fact that they've got these older style garments.
Sure.
The other thing is that it's a clip-on tie. So that's an interesting thing. We're going to come to that. The tie is subject to intense study.
DNA, right?
Very, very recently.
Microscopic DNA.
But the problem with the DNA, yes, I mean, you could do DNA analysis.
The FBI today still has the tie, and it does have some DNA evidence.
But any DNA on there, that tie was literally mailed to different FBI offices early in the investigation so that they could bring it out and show it to other family members of the 800
Can you imagine?
suspects. Yeah. So the amount of DNA that could have gotten on that tie is amazing. But what was discovered on the tie very recently using electron microscopic analysis is a tremendous wealth of rare minerals, rare materials.
Plutonium is one of them, isn't it?
On the tie.
Is it plutonium? Was it? Or a metal?
There were a lot of metals, a lot of very unusual metals.
So we're talking about microscopic flecks of
flecks and dust particles. So an analyst got the tie. A metallurgy analyst got the tie from the FBI. They got them to allow him to take a kind of tape and collect elements or dust off of it.
Sure.
Then they put that through an electron microscope, and what they found was tens of thousands of particles that ended up being, most of them, very rare sort of metals that you would use in aviation.
A specific industry, right? What you're
Very
tying
specific, yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead and reveal who you're...
Well, my secret suspect, for lack of a better term, sounds a little funny, is it's good news, bad news. The good news is it's a gentleman whose last name is Lepsey, Lepsey, I believe. He's from Michigan. His car was abandoned at the Traverse City Airport in 1969. He had a wife and kids and a regular job. He had a lot of paratrooper experience, and he's never been identified as a suspect by the FBI, but there's this unexplained disappearance of somebody that disappeared. It completely disappeared with a great deal of experience and has some physical attributes to the FBI sketch. Again, important significance, never identified by the FBI as an actual suspect. Maybe that's more intriguing than not.
Right. So is there any physical evidence to tie him?
There was some. He was an engineer at Boeing, but part of he had some experience in aerodynamics, but in the industry. But the problem is they couldn't find anybody that worked in his job capacity who disappeared. They couldn't figure out. He was normally working until he disappeared in 1969, unexplained. And 69 is 2 years before the hijacking. So that's a lot of buildup, planning to disappear. He might disappear for 3 months or 6 months before, to go completely off grid 2 years before. but he is still considered a viable suspect by people by independent sleuths that are looking into the case.
So, my secret suspect is a guy by the name of Milton Vordhall. And Milton Vordhall was an experimental metallurgist. So
so there's the tie.
Yeah. So this information is mostly coming from a really nice guy named Ryan Burns. He's got a YouTube channel called DB Cooper Sleuths.
I saw it. It's great.
It's great.
He's got great stuff.
He's an interesting guy. So this guy, Ryan Burns, has put together a tremendous website with a lot of the FBI documents. And so you can go through this stuff yourself to find out what you think, right? You don't have to just take it from us. But Milton Vordhall, to my mind, really makes sense on several different levels. We're just going to go through quickly. So, experimental metallurgist. He grew up in the state of Washington. He went to the University of Washington where he earned a science degree. I think it was chemistry, or it could have been a combination of chemistry and engineering. He goes on to Lehigh University, it's in Pennsylvania, where he earns a master's degree in metallurgical engineering. So he's got the background to sort of work on metals in such a capacity that there would be these rare earth metals, rare materials on his tie. But he actually works on and holds something like 80 patents on the very specific combination. The alloy that was found on this tie is titanium and antimony. And this is a very rare combination. It was experimented on in the 60s, and that's where he gets most of his patents from. But
it's pretty hard. That's pretty interesting.
It's very difficult. Yeah. It would be very useful in aviation, but it's very difficult to actually process this material. And so the processing of it makes it difficult for firms to actually mass produce it. So
this is your this seems like there's some.
It gets stranger. So Vordhall, comes from his parents were Norwegian immigrants, and if you're interested in Norway, you should look at our podcast about the Norwegian commandos who saved the world from Nazi nuclear weapons. So his parents come from Norway. He learns how to shoot. He becomes an expert shooter in high school, and he's also on the chemistry team. So he's kind of a guy who's got a lot of different kind of interests. So he graduates from a graduate school. He goes to work for DuPont, and there he's working on lots of different projects with metals. He then works for the Manhattan Project. He's recruited by the Manhattan Project, and he works on the Fat Man bomb. Fat Man, yeah, Little Boy and Fat Man. He works on Fat Man. And he's working particularly on the translation from uranium to plutonium to use as the fuel for this bomb. And so he solves an important equation that they were not able to do, and he gets some recognition. He's an important part of that's the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki. So after the war, he goes into metallurgy, and he's working on the East Coast for a firm that's called Rim Crew. It has another name earlier. I think they join. There's a merger between the firms, but it's Rem Crew Aerospace. He's working on the SR-71, which is this very high altitude bomber that the United States builds, very fast bomber. And it requires really unusual metals to deal with the heat and the stresses that a plane at that altitude would encounter. And so he starts creating these patents from his work. Now, these patents are kept by Rem Crew, so he doesn't get the proceeds from the patents, but they're assigned to him because he's the inventor. So he then goes on to work as a consultant through Rem Crew for Boeing, as Boeing is interested in this is in the late 60s and early 70s. they're interested in coming up with their own version of the Concorde. And so high speed, again, stresses.
Sure.
He's a guy who's worked on SR-71, so he's the right guy to do the consulting for the metallurgy. They hire him. He builds a house in Henderson, Nevada, where this lab is he's working. The government decides in the summer of 1971 that they don't want to fund this project anymore. So they pull the funding.
Pull the plug.
Boeing lets everybody go. The lab he's working for as a consultant lays everybody off. His boss at this lab, his name is Dan Cooper. So Milton Fordhall is working for a man named Dan Cooper, who lays him off after he builds a house, expecting to live there and work there for a while.
But do we have any? Go ahead. That is a crazy coincidence. I got to tell you, that's a jaw dropper.
That's a jaw dropper.
I don't know how to process that.
His tie contains this very distinct combination of titanium and antimonium. Wait. There are only. This has been sort of sussed out, and there are only a couple of people on Earth who would have worked on this. 2 people in the United States, and that's it. And so the one guy was looked at, and he clearly wasn't the right guy.
Okay.
So this guy with this material...
What happened when they looked at him? What did they find?
Well, he died in 2002.
But was he ever? Was the FBI? Was he ever on their list? Does he ever consider?
Never on anybody's list, off the radar, because this analysis, this rare earth materials analysis, didn't happen until just a few years ago.
Right.
And
technology.
It's technology has allowed for this. So he after this is 1971. So he's laid off in the summer of 71.
Sure lines up with the dates.
It lines up with the dates. He tells everybody, he's talking to Florence Schaffner about why does he have a grudge against somebody? He goes, well, I've got a grudge. I just have a grudge. And so it wasn't against the airline. She asked if he had a grudge against the airline. It's not against the airline. I've just got a grudge. Well, he's got a grudge against the military, against Boeing, against whomever for laying him off. Then, so he retires. He's forced into retirement, essentially. And he goes to a remote spot in...
Anyway, he goes to
okay, and so he retires in the state of Washington. It's Patros, Washington.
Okay.
So he grew up in Washington, and now he's going to retire there. And he lives.
So he knows the Northwest.
He lives a very quiet, modest life for the intervening time until he dies in 2002. Now, he was a runner and a jogger. He
physically fit.
He had won tennis tournaments and golf tournaments.
Skilled.
So he's got a physicality. So he would have been about 58 years old at the time of the hijacking. So he'd have been on the upper edge of the age, but he looked younger than his age. So take a look at the pictures we're going to put up. He looked younger than his age. He was physically fit. Now, he also was a very innovative, very smart guy, educated person, had a master's degree. He made contact lenses for his own kids rather than buying contact lenses. Well, you couldn't even buy contact lenses that easy at the time.
Hard contact.
He made them. He created them himself. Very innovative guy. So he would have been 58 years old. The FBI's range of age was 30 to 55 from eyewitness testimony. He was 5'10" and a half on his military military dog or his military ID. He was listed as 5'10" and a half.
DB Cooper is 6 foot, give or take, is what they said.
But his 5'10" and a half is barefoot. So you throw shoes on him, and he's 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
He has a swarthy complexion. His lower lip kind of juts out in this pouty way. And Florence Schaffner talks about this unusual lip that DB Cooper had. Just kind of sticks out a little bit. So he has a swarthy complexion, which is what is described as a person with a dark complexion, dark hair. And if you look at his haircut in the pictures, he looks remarkably similar. Now, there's a young man on the plane. This is one of the 35 passengers. And he complains, he gives his testimony about this old geezer man, getting all the attention from the flight attendant. So he was described as an old man, a geezer. Old geezer, I think, is the terminology.
Relative, based on your age of the person.
Still, this is a college-age person, and you might find somebody in your 50s as an old geezer, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that lines up. So his height lines up, his physique lines up, his age lines up.
I think, Jeff, if you're arguing that, if you're trying to point at the attributes,
I don't know that this guy is. I can't say that he is. What I'm saying is,
I'm convinced he's a viable suspect.
There are more check marks with this guy than anybody I've come across.
So what you're telling me is that the FBI has been looking at this case for 53 years, and you spent a week and solved it.
No, I didn't spend a week. This
is
not me. This is Ryan Burns. He's the one who gets credit for this. Now, I think he has a team. I'm not gonna assign everything to Ryan Burns, but Ryan Burns is
his thing
team
was really interesting.
It's really interesting.
There's another a personality that's very intriguing. I love that. And the Dan Cooper thing is pretty stunning.
That's who you use your boss that you don't like because he fired you.
It's pretty funny. I mean, it's pretty ironic, but it seems so. The FBI would.
No, in all fairness,
why would the FBI chase that down?
There's a comic book. There's a French-Belgian comic series from the 50s, 60s, 70s called Dan Cooper, and a lot of the covers featured a guy in a parachute and a helmet jumping out of airplanes.
Yeah, we're almost out of time. So there's another YouTuber out there. His name is Eric Ulis, Ulis, who I think has done some pretty interesting and intriguing investigations on the D.B. Cooper case. He has a whole podcast about why the FBI has the flight pattern slightly off by several miles in each direction, which means everybody's been looking for the wrong, up back to 1971, the 1,000 people out looking for D.B. Cooper that night of and the next day. We're looking in the wrong area. And if you're looking in the wrong area, like an MH370, you're going to run into a problem you're not going to find if you're in the wrong space. So there's some interesting podcasts out there that have some really interesting and viable opinions about what happened and why it happened. But nobody still knows.
Nobody knows. That's why it's such a mystery. It's a mystery and a conundrum.
Yes, indeed. Fun, Jeff. To be continued. I'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye-bye.